Next up, we'd like to introduce to the podcast, and that's Sadé Tramble. And Sadé is the current director of academic advising at Kennesaw State University in the Southern Polytechnic College of Engineering and Engineering Technology. She has lived all over the Southeast, from receiving her bachelor's at the University of South Alabama to getting her master's in higher education and student affairs at the University of South Carolina. Her passion for academic advising ignited during her master's program, and Sadé started her professional academic advising journey almost 12 years ago at Florida International University. Sadé attended her first annual NACADA conference that same year, and after her time at FIU, she then moved to Georgia State University and currently is at Kennesaw State University. Sadé became more involved with NACADA, volunteering and serving on the Region 4 Steering Committee as Georgia Liaison, and currently as Region 4 Chair. She is working on her dissertation for her EDD in Higher Education Administration at the University of West Georgia. Sadé has a commitment to student success initiatives that focus on recruiting, retaining, progressing, and graduating historically excluded students in the STEM fields. Sadé, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. I'm happy to be here.
Yes, I'm happy for you to be here too. I was glad that when we talked about it about a month ago, you were saying, hey, let's do it. Let's make this happen. So great to have you on. And so let's talk about you in advising and being in higher ed. What was your path, your journey getting to where you're at?
It was an interesting one, honestly. I went to undergrad prepared to be a meteorology major. I went out of state to study meteorology. That's what I was going to do. And I changed my major my senior year to journalism, and then decided to apply to master's programs in higher ed and student affairs. And advising, some would say, was probably always in my plan, but not always in Sadé's front of her mind of her plan. And so I ended up applying to a couple of 4 different states, 4 different schools, again, all in the Southeast. And South Carolina was my number one. And when I went to all of my people who wrote my letters of rec for me for my master's programs, one of them was in undergraduate advising in South Alabama. And she was one of my mentors in undergrad. And I went to thank her and tell her that I got into Auburn, because all 3 of those who wrote my letters of rec were actually alumni from Auburn. And so I went to say thank you. I got into Auburn. I know it's where you graduated from. And then I told Nancy, I said, I really want to go to South Carolina, though. And I still haven't heard from them. And she goes, South Carolina? I didn't know you applied there. She goes, I know the director of the program there. I'm going to send Jenny an email right now. And again, in my head, not putting things together, I don't know who Jenny is.
Right.
She's referring to Dr. Jennifer Bloom, who was the program director at that point. And she's like, I'm going to send her an email and let her know that you applied and that you're great and she needs to let you in. And so Jenny reaches out to me a week later, calls me and says, you're in on our side. We're waiting on the graduate school. Let's talk about next steps. Let's get you a GA, all this stuff. I'm going to South Carolina, still have no idea who Jenny Bloom is. No idea. Mm-hmm. And it isn't until I get there and start in spring semester that I think some of my cohort mates who work with me in career services explain to me, oh, that's who came up with appreciative advising. And I'm like, no, I did not know that. So I studied under Jenny Bloom at South Carolina. So again, had a mentor who was an advisor, studying under Jenny Bloom, still not putting together that advising is where I'm going to end up, but I'm applying for all of the jobs at the end of my program, and advising being one of those. And it worked out that I got a senior academic advisor position at Florida International for my first position. And I have been in advising ever since.
Oh, that's an incredible story.
It's just so crazy.
And in a way kind of goes full circle, here you have your mentor mentioning just, hey, I know this person named Jenny. Mm-hmm. Okay, apparently Jenny might help me out. Then to find out that it's, Jenny Bloom, and then still kind of not knowing, and then figured out, oh, this is okay, appreciative
Yeah.
advising, academic advising, higher ed, NACADA, and now being a part of an organization that also Jenny is part of.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, I see her at the conferences all the time.
Oh my goodness. That is awesome. That's what's up. And is this in your bio where you talk about, that your passion for academic advising ignited during your master's program? Is this part of it, or is there more for the story?
No, that was pretty much how I got into it, and I've just stayed in it, and I've worked with a lot of different like programs within advising, and I feel like something that's kept me in advising is I always am learning something different to make it, interesting for you to want to stay at an institution or at a college, and in advising, because I'm just always learning new things and applying, new. Right now, it's a lot of research based stuff because I'm working on my dissertation, and I'm reading a lot of other research that's out there. And I'm like, oh, how can I apply this to what I'm interested in too?
Right.
Hmm.
No, and I think that's such a great point, talking about that there's so much to do in advising.
Hmm.
Whether it's within an advising organization or it's at, let's say your own institution. Yeah, climbing ladder wise, you might end up hitting like a ceiling or something, like, because there might only be a certain amount of roles like for advisors. But I think of myself, like in the office I work in, like our office works with like our graduation pledge program, our undecided students, our academic probation students. So there's so many different roles that, hey, if you get tired of one, you might be able
Hmm.
to then work with another student population or another program, and it's still in advising, but it's still something new that you get to learn, so it's still fresh all the time.
Exactly. Exactly. That's kind of how I've been in my career with, starting as, at FIU, and was working mainly with undeclared students there. And then at Georgia State, it was a little bit of undeclared at the beginning, but I eventually transitioned into STEM populations like chemistry. Eventually ended up in fine arts and doing the art and music majors. And that one will definitely keep you on your toes. If anybody has ever advised art and music majors, those are definitely the fun ones. And then moving into like a managerial role at Georgia State too, and I moved to the 2-year side of Georgia State Perimeter College, and so
Mm.
that way you work with all of the majors on the 2-year side, but knowing all of those different majors, the up to 60 credit hours, and getting those students associate degrees again was a completely different experience than what I had working on the 4-year side at the Atlanta campus. And then coming here and doing engineering and engineering technology and learning about all of these majors and things I didn't know existed, like robotics and mechatronics, right?
Yeah. But it's even like you're talking about music majors. The one experience I had was, we usually during our orientations, and we used to call them freshman advising days, back when I used to work in admissions years ago, and we used to do a presentation. So we had like these, like an advising portion of it, and then the faculty advisor would then speak on the major. So I go through my whole spiel, going through like the standard PowerPoint that they gave us to go over, and then the music faculty then speaks and says, forget everything that he just said, because your major is very different. He told you take GEs and some major requirements in your first year. We're going to flip that and do most of your music classes in your first couple years. And I was like, okay, great.
Yes, it is definitely different than,
Mhm.
and that's kind of, I mean, I guess when you think about it, which is weird, now that you've said that, that makes me think of like, yes, I did that for the art and music majors, and it is their music classes with a little bit of, general education thrown in. But that's how it is for engineering and engineering technology too. Like
Yeah.
it's their major classes and math and science, which happen to fall in their general ed, but it's major classes, and then we're throwing in those general education core requirements all throughout their 4 years while they're here.
Hmm. Yeah. And so before I forget, I did have a question in terms of, what started the interest in meteorology?
I just always loved the weather, when I was in middle school and high school. Like it was a long time dream to go and study meteorology. From I think it probably started with, you remember the NASA buses that used to go to your schools, and I think that was when I was in middle school that bus
Yeah.
came, and one of the like positions that you could have on the bus was the meteorologist, like watching the weather. And I just thought that was the coolest thing. And just ever since then, had thought that I would do that. And then I took dynamics and I changed my mind.
Well, if you still have a semi interest and you want to chat with someone out of conference, if you run into David Travis from University of Wisconsin River Falls, he's a provost and vice chancellor there. Yeah, he's big on like weather. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yes. I love talking to other weather people. Like hurricanes are my favorite. That was something else I wanted to do, was fly inside the eye of a hurricane. I thought that'd be the coolest thing. Yes. Which terrified my mother, but
Right. I would imagine so. Like, my daughter wants to do what?
She's like, don't call me before you go in. Just call me when you're out after. That's what she used to say to me.
Just want to make sure you're okay.
Yep.
So how would you describe your institution?
Kennesaw State is striving to be the best R2 in the entire country, right? So we were recently reclassified as R2 under the Carnegie classifications, and it is a growing institution right outside of Metro Atlanta, a very, diverse student population. And so I think we're to the point where we can almost be considered like having that threshold of more minority students and having that minority serving institution status. So it's fantastic school. It's doing all of the right things. We've gotten, since I've been in this college, a master's in intelligent robotic systems, and we now have a PhD in interdisciplinary engineering, which is fantastic.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like for sure, we don't have those at our school, and I know we've had students that are interested in those, and you
Yes.
have to say, well, probably got to transfer somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely compete with Georgia Tech a lot, obviously, for students. And I, when I first started here, had a population and was advising the mechatronics students, and they would come to me and say that they want to transfer to Georgia Tech, and I would say, that's great. What are you going to major in there? Because they don't have like an exact mechatronics degree. It's like a concentration under mechanical engineering. So it's not exactly the same thing. Whereas ours is you will have a diploma degree in, robotics and mechatronics now. Yeah. So it's one of, I think, what used to be, 11 programs, there might be 12 now, but like of 11 or 12 bachelor's programs in the country in mechatronics. So it's really cool.
Yeah, because they've added one more. Another school has it, but that's a small amount that has that major. So yeah, that makes it really great. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And the engineering technology too, those typically are associate degrees, and we're one of a few colleges too that offer those as bachelor's degrees. And they're very still competitive career opportunities for students in those. And so we definitely, and our one is an online program. Our one ET program is online. So they're all great programs. The faculty in this college are fantastic. The department chairs are great. Our dean has worked really hard to make this engineering technology college like one to be reckoned with, in the state of Georgia for sure.
Well, now definitely I know if I have anyone that might be interested in some of those, I mean, like, hey, you got to go to outside of California for that. But there's another institution that you may want to consider. So I'm going to jot that one down. And you're the director of academic advising in that college, in that department. What would you say like your role entails as director?
Communication from the university, academic affairs, to like my team, and from like the college leadership to the team too, and the team back to all of those people as well. Advising at Kennesaw is decentralized. Each college has their own advising office. I do meet with the other managers and directors once a month, but there's not a lot of streamlining between the offices though. But we're working on that, and I'm hoping that we'll get some things streamlined across the board so that the advising experience can just be similar for all of the students, no matter where they go. But yes, I just do a lot of communicating with my team and hiring of a team, because I have a very large team. So the expected amount of, turnover for it occurs. And so I have 12 advisors, 2 senior advisor transfer specialists, and then 10 academic advisors.
Nice.
Yeah.
So pretty full plate with your role. Yes, definitely.
Yes.
And you're with engineering, there's about 8 different degrees or so.
Mm-hmm.
How do you help students like differentiate between those, especially if it's like they're in one and they're like, oh, but you have this other one. I might be interested in that.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going about that with your students?
Yeah, so that's actually a little bit challenging right now, because the students take like an intro class like for their major in their first semester. Like it's a college, intro to computer engineering or intro to industrial engineering technology, right? And so so they learn a lot about it, and sometimes it comes a little bit later, that realization of, oh, I'm an MET and I meant to be an ME, and so we're trying a couple of different things this coming fall to help students with that knowledge. So my boss, who is the associate dean in our college, is spearheading a project to do a one engineering intro class, right? Engineering and engineering technology intro class. And so the course itself will occur in the fall, and then in the spring, the students will take like the lab kind of portion of it, because our intro classes do have labs where students do a intro type project. Mechanical engineering does pumpkin launch. Mechatronics, they build robots, like in just the littler robots, but they build that in their lab. So they all have like their little lab portion. But the course itself is going to have all of the same material to where they can learn a little bit about each major and kind of help them make that decision during their first semester. So then they know by the time they're taking that lab course, oh, I was EET, but now I want to be electrical engineering. And they take the correct lab course then in the next semester, and that would satisfy their intro course credit hours on their degree plan. So that's one way. Another way, the advisors are well-versed in all of the majors in the college, and they have assigned populations under specific majors. But in training, and then we do cross training every so often, so that they're all up to date on all of the changes within the major programs. And they have a basic knowledge and understanding of each of the majors in our college. So they can explain to a student and show a student a different major under a different department, or at least within our college. And then if it happens that a student changes outside of our college, it's a little bit more tricky, because they're not cross-trained all that way with it being decentralized. So that's where referrals have to come into other offices, but they work really well with advisors and other teams. And so they're able to make those referrals as needed for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now, of course, on the flip side, you might have students in these programs that maybe they go through a few of these classes and they're not doing as well, but they, it's like you're trying to figure out, like, is it the class? Is it just the topic? Is it, maybe changing the major? What kind of conversation are you having with those students to kind of help them realize if this would still be the potential major to be in, or if it's maybe switching to something else?
Right. Yeah, I think it's just having that conversation and asking the student, like, what's their ultimate goal? And if sometimes it's a difficult conversation because you're having to try and explain how important math is, but they're not able to sometimes pass pre-calculus or calculus 1. And if they're taking it for a third time or more, it's just, this is a very math heavy major. So what can we go into that still interests you, that maybe doesn't have as much math, and having them put that together. Sometimes with the engineering majors and the engineering technology, they don't know the difference, and so we're trying to get those differences out in front of the students sooner rather than later, so that they understand that the engineering majors are more theoretical and the engineering technology is more hands-on and actually building that theoretical model or theoretical idea that the engineering major came up with. And then you're going back to the engineering person saying, this doesn't work because of XYZ, because we can't, actually make that or put it together, right? But those students, like showing them that the different careers that they can go into, having them meet with their faculty mentors, having them meet with department chairs early on, and just explaining those differences. The engineering technology majors still require a couple, Calc 1 and Calc 2 typically, but they don't require the more in-depth math courses that come afterwards, like the engineering majors do. So having students see that you can still be an engineer. I mean, I like to give examples. And so like my uncle has he has electrical engineering technology degree from Mankato State. And he works for Thermo Fisher based out of Asheville. And they have multiple locations in the US. And he is an engineer. He does engineering stuff and he makes decent money. And it's like showing that and telling those kind of things to students so that they can see, like, you can have an ET degree. And if you work hard and show that you're knowledgeable still in these engineering, theories and ideas, like you can still do the work and get to those places as well,
Yeah, no, love it with the real world examples, because students, or I mean, even as advisors, we might have these assumptions that, of what we think it might be. And then now it's, knowing, okay, there are these alternatives. There's all these others, opportunities that maybe we're not thinking about. So kind of opening the eyes for the students as well. Now, you also have this commitment to student success, but within like recruiting, with retaining, with graduating historically excluded students in the STEM fields. Now, I guess based off your experience and research, or, at your institution or others that you know of, do you feel there's anything that institutions are doing right in helping to get more students involved in STEM, especially if they're usually were historically excluded?
Right. Yes. I think there are some like student success programs that can be implemented to like help these groups of students, because they also tend to be the groups who don't have the higher SAT and ACT math scores, or even high school GPAs, because maybe the high school that they went to, the instructors they have large classes and they're not able to invest as much into the students. I don't know if you've ever read Anthony Jack's The Privileged Poor. It's a fantastic book about the minority students that basically go to Harvard and get scholarships, and the different racism, classism, things like that they experience while they're there. And so there's just more things that we can do programming wise to help introduce them to college, maybe in a summer success, program, introducing them early to a math course and to the instructors who do have the time to be invested in them, right? That's something that Georgia State does. They have a summer success academy that I worked with. I was the advisor who worked with them, and I had a counterpart that I worked closely with in student success who was the coordinator over like that program. And that program had huge success numbers where those students are graduating in 4 years, just like every other student, and they come in under a variety of majors. But I think that you could tweak a program like that to be more, specific for STEM students. And that is something that Kennesaw doesn't currently have right now, is any kind of summer bridge program, which I found very interesting coming here, because Georgia Southern is another school that, we're often compared with, and they have a huge summer bridge program that they do down there. They've been doing it for years because my sister was part of it a long time ago. And so, and Georgia State's been doing theirs now since, I think, I helped start it the first year in 2011. So theirs has been a long time too. So that's something that I really care about, is those success programs. And you can, again, recruit those students to those programs and help them get that individualized, attention that they need. And that kind of stuff helps with them in growing their sense of belonging, which is a really big part of them feeling like that they fit somewhere, so that they can stay there and ultimately persist and retain to graduation.
Yeah. So at least, there's, like when you talk with your engineering students, you're giving more examples. So if there's institutions that are like, hey, we want to implement something, there's already other institutions that have been doing this for years that they could hopefully model with that. So that's really great. Yes. And then speaking of summer programs, you presented at Georgia State. There was a presentation that you did called "Your Success is Our Success: Admitting Freshmen for an Intrusive Summer Program." So can you talk more about that? Because I think that one too, like that particular program, you had also a learning community component as well.
Yes. Yes. So that is the Summer Success Academy there. And at Georgia State, they admitted the students who were like right below their normal fall freshman threshold, right? They went to the group right below them with the GPA and the SAT, ACT scores, and they admitted them for the summer. And it was more intrusive with academic coaching and tutoring and advising. And the students took 2 classes along with their intro to, Georgia State course. And so they were in like kind of a community of those 3 classes kind of together. And then into the fall, when we registered them, they got to choose a couple of classes again together. And then they got to choose some classes outside to like meet other freshmen then that were coming in the fall semester. But they already kind of had a leg up, because they had already spent the summer. They all lived in housing together too, unless they had an exception. They all lived in housing together and just really became a cohort and got to know each other really well. And again, the graduation rates, I don't know them exactly, but Georgia State, keeps track of them. And for that program specifically, I mean, it helped retain those students a lot more with that intrusive coaching, advising, the tutoring. They'd have SI tutoring, that kind of stuff that they were all attending, and in some cases required to attend some of those things to help them, again, get their bearings, understand what they were getting into with college, so that they could make smart decisions throughout the rest of their time there and ultimately graduate still in 4 years.
Love it. Yeah. And I mean, you have like everything holistically for this student. You have like so much involved in it that students get out of it. And so, when you hear people talk about programs, they're like, yeah, it was a success, but what really is success? And, and was it really like, this is one where you really can say, yeah, this was successful. And with all that work that you put in, and the data proves it. So, and seeing all these students get through the program and graduate. So that is really awesome. Now let's talk about more of you and things that you're doing as well in terms of your dissertation. Being a student as well. What went into your decision with choosing higher ed administration, and then also making your choice of attending University of West Georgia for your EDD?
Yes. I have had always said since my master's program, I was planning on getting a doctorate. And I, had lofty goals for myself, way back in my 20s. that I'd have my doctorate by the time I was 30, and I hadn't even applied to programs by the time I was 30. But I had decided the University System of Georgia has a really great thing called TAP, the Tuition Assistance Program. So you can get courses covered at other university system schools. It doesn't have to be the one you work at, but any of the university system schools, you can get tuition covered up to a certain point, tax-free. And so I had, looked around before, hadn't found anything that really interested me, because I said, if I'm going to devote, however many years to a doctorate, I want to love and be really happy with what I go with program wise. Right. And I couldn't find anything that I was interested in, but I went to the region conference in Callaway Gardens a few years ago. And that was 18 is when that was. And I went to a session that I think it was 4 people from the University of Georgia. They were 4 female women who led this session, and they talked about working full-time and getting their doctorates. And some of them were actually just getting their doctors like full-time too, and just maybe doing GA stuff too. But they had such great experiences. They were all at UGA, but in like different programs. And they just really inspired me to be like, it's time. Like, I have got to find the program and I've got to do it. I need to go back and look and see what's out there. And so I went back out and searched all the USG schools I had looked at before. And West Georgia had posted that they were starting a brand new higher education administration EDD program that was completely online and TAP eligible. And I was just like, that's what I was waiting for. And nice. The deadline to apply was April 1st, I think. And our conference was early March. And so wow. I decided I was going to apply to this doctorate program in 3 weeks and also retake the GRE, because my scores had expired by that point, and I needed to retake the GRE. So I reached out to the program coordinator at the time and said, I know this is crazy, but I'm going to apply. If I can have everything to you except for my GRE scores, because I'd looked at testing dates. I said, if I can have all of it to you by the application deadline, except those scores, and I can get those to you a week later, will you consider me for admission for this coming fall? And he said, if you can get me everything except those, but those have to be to me by the next week, he was like, I will look at you for fall. And I did it. Jenny wrote me a letter of recommendation. My boss at the time wrote me one. I took the GRE on one Friday, because the application I think was due on like a Monday or Tuesday, and I took the GRE that Friday. So I had my unofficial scores at the end. I did fine, got at least the minimum of what I needed to apply to the program that they had, advertised on the website. I sent him my unofficial scores that afternoon and told him that the writing, would come later the next week. And then I sent him the official. I think that it was literally Monday. I got the official score reports, sent it to him Monday, had everything else in. And Tuesday, I got an email that said I got accepted as part of the first cohort. Isn't that crazy? It was all like within a month.
But I'm just thinking, how many people, would have done what you did, in the sense of like, okay, I have 3 weeks to try to get everything done. And some people might convince themselves like, oh, it's too soon. It's a sign I shouldn't do it. I'll wait till next year.
Right.
Put it off. Right. And then also the fact that you contacted them to ask like, hey, what if we have this scenario and I get these scores in a week later? Like, some would just probably look at the website and be like, oh, well, it says everything's due by this day. Okay, another sign. I'm going to wait until the next year.
Yes. I did it all. And I went to orientation then, I think, like a month and a half later then, to meet all my new cohort mates. We've had 2, one graduated in the fall, one is graduating this spring, and another cohort person that I'm pretty close with. I've gotten close with him because he used to work here at Kennesaw. And he is on track to graduate this fall, and I'm hoping to join him as well this fall.
That's awesome. Yeah, make it happen.
Yes.
I mean, you've been super proactive with everything, so I'm rooting for you for December.
Thanks. I hope so. We're right now trying to schedule my proposal defense so that I can move to IRB and then data collection. So it's in between. We're in between semesters, or almost in between semesters, and that's what's causing a little bit of a delay in that defense because of my committee and their faculty contracts and whatnot. But hopefully, I'll still be able to stay on track for December. I think it should be okay. I wanted to defend the whole dissertation in mid-September before I leave for my graduation trip that I've had planned for a long time, like a year and a half. But I don't know if I'm going to be able to defend now by then. But I think my goal is still to have my part done with, everything done on my side by the time I go on that trip, so that then it's just kind of edits and then defense when I get back.
Yeah. But yeah, it's kind of like you're saying, it's like this process and all these steps, and then you have a committee, and then making sure that they have time to, review and, and like you're talking about like faculty contracts and all that. So
yes. There are a lot
yeah.
of pieces that move in this and have been pushed and moved for a very long time. I never knew I would cry so much as an adult until I started this doctorate program. And I know that probably scares people off from doing this. Like, in the end, this is going to 100% be completely worth it. But if I'm being honest, there were a lot of tears throughout this journey.
Yeah, I feel there are people listening, they're like all ready to go. They're like, this is great. I love hearing Sadé's story. And then once you just talked about crying, they hit pause and they're like, okay, I'm not listening to this podcast interview anymore. I'm not going to do it.
No, you should definitely do it. Because again, in the end, that it's going to be worth it. I think my research is honestly part of what really drives me, and doing the research. And I've already got like a list of things I want to research after I finish this. And I never thought I would be that person that has like a list of things she wants to work on and research and do. And, but yeah, it really has driven me to like explore new things. Again, it's probably what keeps me interested still in advising, right? Because I'm not doing the same thing over and over. I'm always trying to improve upon our student success in the different ways that I am able to within the realm of advising and student success,
Are you allowed to talk a little bit about what your dissertation's on?
Yes. So the current title of it is "Where Have All the Black Girls Gone in the STEM Pipeline?" It's a phenomenological study about the essence and lived experiences of Black females in STEM majors at a PWI. And so, yeah, I'm just interested to hear about their lived experiences and their STEM majors. See what's helped make them successful,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. I can't wait for you to be done. And then, this is going to be great. So you put in all this work already. So like you're saying, it's going to be worth it.
Mm-hmm.
And then you were mentioning, a lot of these connections come from attending conferences and meeting other people. And most recently, there was a Region 4 conference.
Yes.
How was that?
It was great. It was fantastic. We didn't quite beat out your region for the most registered people. We were so close. 327 registered for the conference, which is fantastic for, again, coming out of, pandemic, basically going to endemic, right? And we're 327 in Atlanta from all of the states. We had some people from, I think, South Carolina and Tennessee and Kentucky too, who came to the conference. It was fantastic. We had great co-chairs here at Kennesaw State. And yeah, our speakers were fantastic. We got a lot of good feedback about our keynote speakers, Melinda Anderson and Michael Sansevero. He's at Georgia State. But yeah, people took away so many things from both of them. They were fantastic. It was my first like in-person planning experience of a region conference. It was very challenging, but a really good learning experience all together. And glad I don't have to plan another region conference because I am outgoing region chair.
I still got one more I got to do, and then I can be like, "Yep, I'm done."
Right? You know what I'm talking about. It's a lot. Like planning a region conference is a lot more, and you're doing the annual conference too. But I think
Yeah.
you've now kind of seen the difference of what goes into them, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
it's a lot more on the conference planning committee, right, for a region conference than it is for an annual conference. And so, I mean, they're both a lot because of scale wise, but
Right.
it's definitely a different experience. So I'm glad I had it. Like I feel fantastic about how it went. It was a
Yeah.
successful event. But it is a little stressful. But it's good for people who have that planning, experience or want that planning experience. I think that's really good for them to be able to get that through NACADA.
Right.
It's a fantastic thing to put on your resume and be able to take with you into like future roles within advising or in higher education, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, and it's like, as we have, you had your conference co-chairs for Region 4. I had mine for Region 9, and how great a job that they did
Mhm.
with it. But how many moving parts there is to it, to where
Yes,
we're still in there, kind of feeling like we're also co-chairs in a sense too.
exactly.
But yeah, and then to finally be at the very end and it's done, and then like the adrenaline finally like starts to shut down.
Yes. Yes, I felt very guilty because I had asked the one co-chair to do it a long time ago, right? And 2 years ago, it was maybe even longer than that ago. I'm not sure. And I asked her to chair it. And then we had talked like in region chair meetings and said, oh, we should have co-chairs. So then I went to her and I said, listen, you should ask a co-chair. Like it's your conference. You pick the co-chair. I picked you. You pick your co-chair, and she picked, another director on campus. And at the time, she was the same as me. We both started as managers over our units in advising. She was in CSM and I was in Spakete. And so then she ended up getting moved to like a new program and being an interim director of that after I had asked her to do this. Plus it was Georgia liaison during this time too. And the entire like last 6 months, I felt so incredibly guilty for like asking her to do all these things because she was so busy in like this new program that she got thrown into and became director of, like the actual director of last year. And I told her, I said, if I would have known all this was going to happen, I would not have asked you. But she was fantastic about it. Like
Yeah.
she had a wedding planning background, so she had the experience. And we had the times where it was doing my best to calm her down when we got those stressful
Yep.
situations, when we got like our AV bill of $29,000. I mean, a
Yeah.
quote, not a
Yep.
bill, but
Yeah.
a quote. And we were like, what now? Because that's, 2/3 of our entire conference budget.
Hmm. Yep.
So again, it's all very good experience. And now she's like super thankful that it's over with because her life can go back to normal. And I will never ask her to do a thing again because I feel that guilty.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes the conference co-chairs for Region 9, they were looking at me anytime I was like, it was stressful times in terms of like, okay, we gotta, we got the AV quote, or here's like the food quote.
Yep.
How much can you actually have? I'm like, hey, just create a wish list and then we're gonna go from there. But trust me, it'll all work out.
That's,
And
yep.
they're like, how can you say that? And I'm like, trust me, like I had experience with the 2020 conference. It got canceled, but we got up to like a month before. And
Right.
so I can tell you, it'll be fine. Don't
That's
worry.
That was exactly the attitude I had, Matt, because I just said, I was like, listen, at this point, the show has to go on. Like we're
Mhm.
not canceling it, right? So it has to go on. And so we're going to figure it out and it's all going to be okay. And it's all going to work out. I said the same thing. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay, Hannah. It's going to be okay. going to be okay, Brittany. Both of them, you know.
And it was
It was.
better than anyone ever thought. So
Mhm.
it all worked out. And so you've talked a little, through kind of this story, some of your involvement. Can you talk more about your involvement and how you got started in Nakata?
Yes, yes. So I was at a region meeting in Minneapolis at the annual conference, right? And JJ, right, Joshua Johnson,
Mhm.
he was our region chair at the time. And so I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, I want to get involved. Like you're talking about, doing all this, that, and the other. So where should I start?" And he was like, "Be on Hazel's committee for the awards committee," right? Because Hazel was the awards chair at that point. And Hazel works at FIU. So I actually knew her, Hazel Hooker, Dr. Hazel Hooker. She works at FIU. So I had actually known her when I was in my time at FIU. And so I just volunteered and helped review awards applications for the region conference for 2 years. That was how I just started volunteering doing that. And then Hazel stepped down from the position. And at that point, we had still some appointed positions and some elected positions, right, on the steering committee. And so Brad was the region chair at that point. And so he appointed me to awards coordinator. And so I did that for a 2-year stint. And then I decided to run for Georgia liaison. And so I did my first elected position, and ran against, I think, like 3 other people. And I was like, there's no way. Like, I've been doing this for 2 years, barely know anyone. I'm not going to win this. And that's okay. I'll find something else. I'll find my place. Right. And somehow Brad like contacted me. He was like, "Congrats, you got it." And I was like, "How?" But I guess it was meant for me to be in that position because I did the Georgia liaison for 2 years and ran for region chair then. And here I am trying to figure out what my next step is in Nakata.
Yeah. And I'm sure you probably have people asking you too, like, "Hey, what are you going to be doing?"
What is it? Yes.
I don't know. I'll figure it out and I'll let you know when I know.
Yes. Yes.
And we're recording this in a Global Advising Week. Of course, this will
Yeah.
be posted in the middle of this month. But there's with Global Advising Week, it's a global celebration honoring academic advising professionals. Get to celebrate, acknowledge, thank folks. Is there anyone at your institution or anyone in Nakata that you want to shout out?
Yeah. I mean, oh, wow, where do I start? Okay, so JJ, I mean, he's fantastic, and he is the reason that I am where I am. And so I am very thankful for not only his like connections through Nakata, but like his friendship, because we are friends and talk on the phone every couple of weeks to catch up and that kind of thing. And we'll go and visit each other outside of Nakata. So that's someone who definitely deserves a lot of credit. And geez, who else? I really like, I have my Nakata group, right? Who I hang out with when we go to conferences, and we actually have a chat on Facebook with the group of us talking about our planning for like each, annual and region conference. And we're already planning our excursions events for when we're in Portland. We've been messaging about those. So I'm thankful for all the people in that chat. There's about 6 or 7 of us, so I'm not going to name all of them, but they know who they are. And I think that we kept each other honestly very grounded during the pandemic, right? So when we went into the pandemic and we were all in lockdown and at home for what we thought was going to be 2 weeks and ended up being months, right? We started doing Zoom happy hours together at home. And I think that time together to just not only, talk about the craziness that work was going on and how we were adjusting, but it was just great to connect with them, on a personal level too, outside with everything that was going on. So I'm very thankful for all of them. I think probably my first, director, Charlie at FIU, he was the one who, sent us to the annual conference in Orlando all these years ago and was like, "Yeah, it's in Florida. Everybody go." if it weren't for him doing that, like I wouldn't even know that what NACADA was before that, because that was my first NACADA experience attending annual conference in Orlando, which will be back in Orlando next year. So again, kind of come full circle in another way, right?
100%. Yeah, and if anyone has any questions or wants to connect with you based off this interview, how can they reach out to you?
They can reach out to me in my email. It's STRAMBL and the number 1 at kennesaw.edu, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I find myself checking LinkedIn more often. It's where I find actually a lot of articles that I want to read related to higher ed.
Yeah.
Oddly, there and Twitter, that's where I find those. But yeah, either one of those ways is great.
All right, sounds good. No, this has been a fantastic interview. Learned so much about you. We've talked just briefly at conferences through social media. We see each other on Zoom meetings a lot, but never really get to have that really in-depth conversation. So it's great getting to know you better, and look forward to seeing you in Portland in October.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.